We are back here on the Steam Room. Charles Barkley, Ernie Johnson, and if you want some top drawer college football talk, you have come to the right place.
Yes, you have.
Because nobody talks college football quite like Paul Finebaum. ESPN, SEC Network, a guy you've known for a long, long time, Chuckster.
You know, the thing about Paul is I've known Paul so long, I'm going to call him, he's like my older uncle. He's like my older uncle. Because, you know, he's obviously exploded in the last few years, but he was already the biggest thing in Alabama like my entire life.
Yeah.
Paul, welcome.
Well, thank you. And Ernie, to show you how long Charles and I have been together, I covered Charles when he played high school he should have played high school football, when he played high school basketball.
Yeah. So you know we're all about Leeds High School then.
I do, and because of my friendship with Charles over the years, I decided to wait and have the real story of his recruitment to Auburn and all the money that he got there revealed later after my death. So I don't want to embarrass him every time he heads down there for a game.
Well, let me scratch that off the question list.
Well, let me just tell you this. Listen, Alabama was paying Ennis Wiley and Bobby Lee Hurt so much they couldn't get me under the salary cap. So I had to.
Well, you're right. I literally, my career began investigating those two, and Charles was an afterthought, as you know, Ernie. Nobody wanted him. He was, he destroyed Bobby Lee Hurt in a Christmas tournament, and all of a sudden he started getting offers. Until then, he was barely getting sniffs from junior colleges.
Hey, let's. I know we're going to talk about this college football playoff and the 4 teams involved, but first, Paul, let's just go back. Born in Memphis, you go to the University of Tennessee, correct?
That is correct.
And then, and as Charles says, you know, you were this iconic radio personality in Alabama. But when did Paul Finebaum become Paul Finebaum?
Well, it really started, I was a newspaper reporter, and I thought that's all I ever wanted to do, Ernie. I became an investigative sports reporter in the early 80s. And back then there were very few newspapers doing that. So that's what I wanted to do. I got in trouble on one of those stories I just mentioned. I ended up getting sued over it. It was the Bobby Lee Hurt case, Charles. And as a result of that, my newspaper career was crippled for a couple of years because we did win the lawsuit, but after spending millions of dollars on legal fees, the newspaper had little interest in promoting me. And ultimately, I moved on to radio, where it really kicked in, and I loved it. But I never lost my love of being a snoop and an investigator, which I think has helped me as I've matriculated through this career.
You know, did you ever think you were going to blow up like you have? Because, Paul, listen, you were humongous in Alabama most of my life, but now you have become the voice of college football. And, like, anytime somebody has success, it's always a shock to the system. But have you ever been shocked and like, wow, I cannot believe how my broadcasting career has just taken off?
Yeah, I mean, I am surprised by it, and I don't spend a lot of time analyzing it, because when you look like me and you're on television, I mean, you're thinking somebody made a big mistake. So but I really it has only been in the last couple of years. Going to ESPN was the big move. I mean, I think that's an understatement, but I was already really inching toward my 60s at that point. So it came as a shock. I embraced it, and I loved it. And it's still hard. I mean, there are still pockets of people, and Ernie, you understand where I'm coming from here, who do not take me seriously because I didn't play football. Therefore, I have no earthly idea what I'm talking about. So I've always tried to stay away from the X's and O's, which I can't speak to with authority, and talked about the bigger pictures, the bigger picture stories. And fortunately, in college football, those big picture stories have dominated over the years.
How do you develop a thick skin when you're talking college football? Because when you open your mouth, Paul, you're going to tick a lot of people off. You're going to make some folks happy. But there are going to be folks out there who's, he said this because he's always said this about this team, or he likes this team. How do you develop that kind of a skin that says, hey, throw it at me, I can take it?
I mean, I read it, but I don't react to it because I decided, especially with social media, that if you spend your time reacting to what people say, it will undo you.
Yeah.
It will eat you up. So I never react. I think not growing up, but living in Birmingham with the Alabama-Auburn dichotomy, you got used to it. And there was a time when Alabama people hated my guts. I mean, there were literally death threats on me in Birmingham, and Charles I guarantee you, he can relate to that. I had Alabama coaches trying to get me fired. And now I'm labeled as the biggest Alabama homer that ever lived, which I find very humorous. Hey, if Nick Saban had lost 2 games this year, I probably would have been calling for his firing.
I wish he'd lost that second one the other day, but that didn't happen there, Paul. That was a little painful to watch, but now we got these 4 teams in here, and you got Alabama #1 taking on Cincinnati. You got Georgia and Michigan. So what's your gut telling you right off the bat here?
Well, I did something last week that I literally had not done in 11 years. Charles, the last time I picked against Alabama was in 2010 when Cam Newton beat them down 24-3 at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And since then, I decided, you know what, so I picked Alabama. I went against them Saturday before the game just in time to see what we all saw. So I am not doing that again. I mean, whether I'm right or wrong, I think sometimes you just have to bow down to the holy Saban and realize that he's probably not going to blow it. But I do think the country is probably pulling for a Michigan-Alabama game. I don't know about you, Ernie, with your school ties, but does any Georgia fan want to see Alabama again in the national championship?
I think they actually do. I mean, despite how painful it was the other day, you still look at, okay, there are 4 teams left, and you're one of them, and this team was unbeaten, went in, and Alabama was ultimately prepared for that team, and really, Georgia looked rattled to me in that game, and they were outplayed in every facet of the game. But I think there's still this that, hey, well, let's see a month, playing a month apart. Yeah. What does Kirby Smart learn about what Alabama threw at him, and see if he's able to, come prepared in a way that Alabama was after that Auburn game, and people are looking at Alabama like, I don't know how good they are, and Nick's talking about, hey, thanks for the rat poison, it was yummy, but I think that would be a real test, and to say, okay, this is what we learned from that first meeting, we want them again.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I say that tongue in cheek because what ultimately matters is if you win the title. It's worth remembering that Alabama in 2011 lost an epic game of the century to LSU, and 8 weeks later they beat them. They shut them out for the national championship. And what I find interesting to support your point, even though you were contradicting mine, Ernie, is in 2017. We all know how Alabama beat Georgia in a walk-off for the national championship. Have you ever seen an SEC championship flag waved by a Georgia fan that year? No, those things don't matter once you get to the next level. And so I do think it's an opportunity for Kirby Smart. If it's another painful evening, he's got plenty to keep him company in terms of Nick Saban.
No doubt.
I tell you, I think there's 2 things working here. I think that television people want to see Saban against Harbaugh because of the animosity. And I think some people are like, well, we don't want to see Georgia again. I think there's 2 things working there. From the people who run college football, they're like, we can make a big deal out of Saban against Harbaugh. And I'm not sure we can make a big deal out of what we just saw out of Georgia. Because let me tell you something. I love college football. That was the most shocked I think I've ever been watching a game. Like, I saw Georgia play in person down at Auburn. I was like, man, these guys are scary. And I watched them throughout the season because of you and guys like that. But Saturday, and I think that was the first time that I've actually been shocked watching a game. I got to admit that.
Paul, what chance does Cincinnati have against Alabama?
Ernie, I don't want to laugh at Cincinnati because I think it's a remarkable story. I think they've got a slight chance. Yeah, I think it will be difficult for Alabama, in spite of what everyone says on their side, to take Cincinnati as seriously as if they were playing someone else. I think the 3 weeks helps Alabama, though, figure out some of the problems that they have been having throughout the year. So, I mean, ultimately, I would go with Alabama if you're playing 13 and a half. History would not indicate it's going to be close. Alabama usually blows teams out in these semifinal games.
Paul, got a two-headed question for you. Where are we going with Oklahoma and Texas coming to the SEC and this name, image, and likeness thing? What do you think about those two things?
Yeah, I think the Oklahoma-Texas thing is a great story, but by the time we get to it, I'm really curious where Oklahoma and Texas are going to be. And I think it's still going to be 2 or 3 years down the road, although I would, if I'm sitting there at Texas, one of those billionaire oil tycoons, I might just spend the 80 million and get out of the Big 12, because they are not going to have a good time there. I'm not an official expert, but you can just kind of sense that nobody likes having them around for a couple more years, and they'll do everything they can to screw them over. But I think on NIL, Charles, I think I haven't seen evidence that's affecting teams, but I think as we spend more time after the season digesting it, I think we're going to learn more about it. There's no way that if you're 21 and you're or 20 years old and you're Bryce Young and you've got an 8 or 9 or $1 million deal, you're going to be quite the same as you were as a college student. And I say that, Ernie, because I know, I mean, Charles literally lived on pizzas. I know that for a fact one night, because I was covering a game in Houston I believe it was 1981 or 2, Charles, and I got a knock on my door. And it was I think Domino's. I don't know. It was the pizza delivery guy, and I said, no, you're the wrong. I don't eat pizza at midnight. It's a little bit farther down the hallway, Mr. Barkley's room. But I mean, you tell me. I mean, if you had $1 million in your pocket at Auburn in the '80s, what would you have done with it? How would you have been different? You were already a problem.
Yeah. You know, I'm worried about the haves and the have-nots going forward, because if I'm it's two trains of thought. In basketball, if I got to go to college for 1 year, where can I make the most money in 1 year? And I think that's going to start really separating schools going forward. But I think the big problem is going to be in football. If you have to stay in college for 3 years, you really got to say to yourself, I got a chance of going to this college, but I'm going to make 5 times more money going to one of these bigger schools. I love all the players. I want us to get as much as possible, but I'm not sold on the NIL thing, because I think we really gonna have a disparity going forward.
Well, Charles, one more thing on that. I think the transfer portal is equal to that, because if you're sitting there with Kirby Smart or Nick Saban right now, or any of the great coaches, you're really picking and choosing. I mean, think about this for a second, Ernie and Charles. You have Bryce Young for another year. He may very well have been able to go out as the number one pick in the draft if he could come out, but he can't. If you're like Jamison Williams last year, who was a number 4 receiver at Ohio State, he's now one of the top receivers in college football at Alabama. You're going, why don't I just go play there for a year? Why don't I pick and choose? And I think that's equally as dangerous for players late in their career, to be able to look at the roadmap and say, I want to play there, or there. And I think, but I have been wondering about college football for a long time. It doesn't really have a soul. It doesn't have a conscience. And it's hard to have less of one when you don't have one to begin with.
Hey, can I ask you this is kind of selfish on my part. I want to ask George a question about going into this Michigan game. So what do you make of the quarterback situation there? And you know what's funny? You look at social media after that loss to Alabama, And there is so much stuff spewed out there about, oh, I told you a walk-on couldn't do this, and I told you, you're talking about Stetson Bennett. Here's a guy who's getting all the accolades when you're undefeated, and then you lose a game, and then it's, oh, now they got to make a change. Do you see a quarterback change in the weeks between now and that Michigan game?
Ernie, if you know Kirby Smart, the answer would be no. He is very stubborn. He's very loyal, and I don't know what's underneath the situation with JT Daniels. There have been some issues with him. When would he play last year after his injury? For those who don't know, he came from Southern Cal, where he was another 5-star, can't miss. And I mean, I just don't understand why Kirby did not go to him late in the game when it was seemingly lost and you had maybe one shot at changing the dynamic. So I think he'll be asked that, but precedent would indicate that he's a very stubborn guy. And I know it's really unfair to bring up Justin Field. I believe in the moment, and that's all you can judge him on. Kirby Smart made the right call. Jake Fromm was the better quarterback. Justin Fields had not had enough experience. He turned out to be a significantly better player, and in this case, it may also be true. But I think Stetson Bennett the fourth is Georgia's quarterback.
But see, as a Monday morning quarterback, I'm saying to myself, I go back and look at Coach Saban and Dabo Swinney, two of the Saban's the GOAT. Dabo's terrific. They made quarterback changes. Like, I don't think you have to live in the moment. You can't be loyal. I mean, think about it. Jalen Hurts and Kelly Bryant, they lost 4 games total in college. But Coach Saban says, I've got to go to Tua. And Dabo went to Trevor when Kelly Bryant had lost 1 game in 2 years. Don't you get paid as a coach to make those tough decisions?
You do. And as we watch this unfold, and if Kirby Smart does not win the national championship, a torrent of criticism is going to come down on him. And I think he has now boxed himself into this position. But he may. I think that's what you're supposed to do, Charles. I totally agree. And Dabo and Saban made brilliant decisions. I don't even think they were difficult decisions. The only thing we don't know what's going on with JT Daniels, and we're getting no evidence. We're certainly getting no help from the Georgia coaching staff on that. But yeah, I mean, I think the three of us. I mean, I'll speak for. I would make a quarterback change, but I'm not confident Kirby Smart will.
So who you got? This will be a short answer type of thing. Who you got in the semifinals then? Obviously, you think Alabama.
I think Georgia because I think Georgia. I'm not going to let Saturday dissuade me from what I saw in the previous 12 weeks. And you can quibble about the opponents, but Ernie, it's one of the most dominating performances all year I've ever seen. And yeah, I still can't quite figure out that defense. I think Kirby was a little bit too conservative, and he didn't adjust well. And that's a knock on him, though. But I think with 3 weeks to get ready for Michigan, I like Alabama and Georgia, and then I think picking the next game, if that happens, will be one of the tougher picks. I think we all could be wrong if we jump on the Bama bandwagon saying let's not go against Nick Saban again. Doesn't matter to me. But I think it puts Kirby Smart in a position. He's getting a second chance. You can't. This is not a charity golf tournament where you can buy a mulligan very often, but that's exactly where he could be.
Well, Paul, I hate to bring up a bad subject. It's been called now the disaster in the pasture down at the Iron Bowl. That was one of the most painful losses in the Iron Bowl, in my opinion. It was a very frustrating. I always go to the Iron Bowl. That was very frustrating, and I had to get it off my chest. I love my school, but that was a gag job, number one.
Well, no, I agree with you. You always hear the cliche. There's 2 or 3 points in every game that can determine the outcome. I mean, there were more than that. It was. I thought Brian Harsin, it's somebody I've liked and admired throughout the year. I thought he bungled that thing badly a couple of different times. And that's why, we're having a conversation now that we probably shouldn't be having. Ernie, Auburn should have won that game. Charles knows that more than I do because he was watching it as an Auburn fan. I was a so-called neutral observer.
Hey, so Paul, well, we're going to the Birmingham Bowl. And
Congratulations.
I think see, that's not funny, Paul. It's too soon. It's too soon. So
well played, Paul.
I got to make this decision.
So you don't have to get a hotel room. You can stay with family.
No. That's actually the question, Paul. So I don't think I can consider us going to a bowl if I can drive from my mom's house. So I think I should get a hotel so I can at least feel like I went to a bowl game. Do you agree?
Yeah, guys. When I was young, we did. I'm not trying to sound like everybody else, but we didn't have a lot of money. And I remember our first vacation, and I later figured this out. We drove about 15 miles south of town and spent 2 nights at a Holiday Inn because they had a pool. Yeah. And that's all kids wanted back then. That's kind of how I view this bowl game for you, Charles. I mean, you get to you can stay downtown right by the stadium. And take in all of what Birmingham has to offer. You're gonna end up spending more money at this game than you planned on because Ernie, whenever Charles goes back to Birmingham, he's stuck having to buy everybody's meal and all the prom dates, corsages. I mean, this will be you'll have to really go deep into your bank account for this game.
Hey, you had Chuckster on your podcast recently, correct? And
that is correct.
And this struck me as a very interesting question. You asked him about doing something he hasn't done or going somewhere that he hasn't gone. What was the question, Chuckster, you recall?
Things that on my bucket list.
Uh-huh.
And yeah.
And what did you say?
I want to meet Eminem.
Right. But in terms of travel, I mean, you had kind of a unique thing.
As I get on the back nine of my life, I've always wanted to get like a
you're way past Amen Corner, Charles. Come on.
Yes, I'm on the back nine. I got this idea. I'm going to get a big bowl and put 30 countries in there. Mm-hmm. And like 1 week a month, I'm going to go to a foreign country for 1 week. That's like always been, like I'm saying, as I get older in life, I want to enjoy all the success I've had. I don't want to be working when I'm old. So I was like, you know what? See the whole world. So I'm going to get me a big old bowl, crumple up about 30 countries, and like 1 week a month, Chuck gone.
Well, Paul, you'll be interested to note that because you sparked this conversation with that question, Abby, you want to come by? We've actually got a bowl with countries in there.
First of all, you got no pride wearing that shirt.
Hey, look at Abby with her dogs.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Dogs. Maybe like chihuahuas, not no dogs.
All right.
These got countries on it.
Yes, sir. So pick one out and here's going to be your first trip.
So I'm 100% telling you.
Where are you going, Charles?
Paul, I don't know if I'm going to be safe over there. Angola.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, I will go with you.
Some 1992 headlines with Angola and the Dream Team.
To the dude from Angola.
I don't know anything about Angola, but Angola's in trouble.
Well, Ernie, if I could, I was interested when I asked about, I wasn't even interested in countries. I was thinking famous people when I asked, is there someone you had never met? And maybe you did. I was betting that Charles was going to go with some world figure like Nelson Mandela. And instead of Nelson Mandela, he gave me Eminem.
Yeah, there's no predicting the Chuckster.
Charles, have you heard from Marshall Mathers since you said that?
I've not heard from him, but at some point, I always want to meet people who are successful. And he's one of the best to ever do it. Like I said, I told you, I've worked with Sam. I've met Denzel. People like to do that.
Hey, look, if Angola, if you don't want to do Angola, try another one.
Yeah, I agree. That's a security risk for you.
Y'all are asses. They all got Angola on.
You're going to Angola.
Who was it? Herlanda Quambra.
That's his name?
Was the guy that you elbowed from Angola.
We actually made up.
He later said that a couple of years later.
Yeah.
came back. You were very kind to him.
Yeah, that it heated him on. He hit me and I hit him back.
Did he really hit you?
He hit me. Hey, and I will tell you something else.
I don't know about
Go back
that.
and look at the '92 Olympics. 2 games later, they had a full court brawl with Spain. They were skirting the rules a little bit. They actually got in a big brawl with the home country. So people's like, well, maybe Charles was right. They were playing a little rough.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, listen, you probably shouldn't be elbowing me when you're down 72 points.
Yeah. It was a 31-0 run at that point.
Ernie, we could do a whole series on Charles's. When I was a newspaper guy, I covered all of his brawls. And my favorite, I think it was in Milwaukee, Charles. Not to go old school here, but you had thrown a guy out of a bar through the opening door. Then the judge asked Charles if he had any regrets. He said, "Yeah, I wish I'd thrown him out of a 3rd floor building."
I regret we were on the 1st floor. Are you kidding me? You gonna throw a drink on me and think I'm just gonna take it?
Oh man. Hey, Paul Finebaum, it's been great talking to you, man. I appreciate you taking the time.
Can I tell a Finebaum story?
Yeah, you can.
I did Paul's show last week, and he'll always be one of my favorite people. And anytime he's ever asked me to be on the show, I'm gonna do it. Because Paul, he really did something special for me. He came to my mom's funeral, and I'll never forget it. I was breaking up, trying to say what I was trying to say, but I look over there and Paul's there, and it really meant a lot to me personally. And I'll never forget that. And Paul, thank you.
Charles, thank you for saying that. And Ernie, obviously you knew Charles's mom and grandma.
Yeah.
And I've taken a lot of flack from both of them. So I mean, they used to wear me out, but I loved them and respected them. And I feel the same way about you, Charles. And it's so special that you mentioned that.
He's the man the Wall Street Journal called the Oprah Winfrey of college football.
Yes. And I knew him in the beginning.
Yes, you did.
Hey, man.
Paul, keep up the great work,
Keep
man.
up the great work, and congratulations on all you said. Hey, your wife is a doctor too, correct?
That is correct, yes.
I mean, so he got some brains there too.
Have a great day, Paul. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure.